Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, along with Tricia Flanagan, here on Campaign for America, live on Facebook, on YouTube, and now on Periscope. And as I promised a few days ago, we are going to be reaching out to more social media platforms to get more and more people the information that you need, that the mainstream media is not giving you. Tricia, last night, record-breaking number of viewers. In fact, as of this morning, and look, we've never experienced having a total so far of almost 2,500 viewers in one broadcast. And I think that's testimony to our viewers who are sharing and the information that we're able to get out to them.
Well, I think you're exactly right. As you said, the mainstream media is certainly not covering any of this breaking news. And this is the time when, information seekers are looking for the truth. That's what we're committed to delivering, breaking news that's shrouded in truth. And I'm thrilled that we're reaching more and more people than ever. Please continue to share, because getting the message out to others who can hear it is equally important. It's just as important as the broadcast that we do. So thank you for making this a possibility and for making it a success.
Now I'm looking at our feed right now, first night on Periscope, and people are starting to come on board. We've got about close to 400 subscribers on Twitter, and I know that they're pretty well attached to Periscope. So we're going to see a lot of expansion in our broadcast. So please stick with us, folks. We've got exciting things happening, and our viewership is growing in leaps and bounds. Before we speak about what is a continuation of last night's breaking down of what is exactly happening in the courts, a few things, again, folks, I'd like to share with you. We're not joking around and we're not exaggerating with regard to an evil movement in this country from socialists and communists. This is real, folks. This is happening right now as we speak. People have been arrested. When I say people, small business owners, homeowners, people just like you and me have been arrested in the state of California, in the state of New York, in the state of New Jersey. It is spreading, folks. What is spreading? A socialist communist agenda to control your lives, my life and your life. This is why Georgia is so important. This is no longer just about President Trump. And by golly, we hope that he is victorious and that he is able to maintain the presidency. But what is really important now is for us to understand that President Trump built a wall to protect America on the US-Mexican border. We need to build a wall in Georgia to make sure that the socialists and the Democrats and the communists don't take control of the US Senate. And I'd say, Tricia, that is an absolute necessity for this country to survive as we move forward. We need a wall against that evil agenda. This is why people need to go out and vote and pray and make sure that they do their due diligence as American patriots to ensure that America is always will be having this flag, this great flag flying for our children and grandchildren in the future.
Well, exactly. And, January 5th in Georgia, that is ground zero. And you're right, we have to hold the line. We have to make sure that we fight against the tyranny of the left. And look, they've made no secret of what they want to accomplish. Chuck Schumer said, first we take Georgia, then we change America. That sounds eerily similar to what former President Barack Obama said before his inauguration, where he said that he wanted to fundamentally change this country. This is what's at stake. It doesn't get any more important than that. And, those two races, those two Senate races, Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, we have to make sure that All America supports them because All America is riding on that race.
Now, I did hear from law enforcement officers with regard to my comments last night, so I'm going to repeat those comments, and I'm going to make sure that people understand exactly what I am saying. There are 4, maybe 5 sheriffs who are elected in the state of California who have made it very, very clear that they will not enforce the socialist communist agenda of Governor Newsom or of any mayor or elected official in the state of California who's advancing an agenda that is making into criminals law-abiding Americans with regard to opening up their stores, their businesses. This is a good thing. It's about time some elected officials stand up and shoulder to shoulder together fight back this agenda. Now, what I said last night was that I believe that police officers on all levels begin to fight back. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm going to qualify that statement as I did last night. If you are an elected law enforcement officer, like these sheriffs, you're not accountable to anyone but the people. The people elected you. You don't have to obey the edicts of a governor, of a socialist, of a communist. And as these 4 sheriff's officers did, they have ordered their men and women in uniform not to enforce what these edicts are, what these executive orders are. I shared last night that there was a video, I believe it was in San Francisco. I meant to look it up today to see where it happened, but there was a business owner, folks. I think he was a restaurant owner, but he's a business owner. He was approached by 3 or 4 men in plain clothes, in nighttime, and they were approaching him, and he ran to his vehicle, got in his vehicle, and these guys surrounded his car, and one of them standed in front of his vehicle. The guy was scared to death. He thought he was going to be carjacked, according to reports. So he started to drive away. Well, he finds out that those 4 individuals were police officers, not in uniform. Now, I've been a police officer for 38 years of my life. I supervised every single division, patrol division, investigation division. This type of police work is absurd. Police officers, not in uniform, what do you expect a citizen to do who's being chased down the street? And then you break all sorts of protocols, you break all sorts of rules and regulations, endanger your life and the life of this guy in the car. For what? For him going inside his business to open it up so that he could feed his wife and his kids. This, Tricia, is absurd. It's ridiculous. And we said all along that somebody or a group of people are going to die as a result of these stupid, idiotic regulations. Those cops, I'll tell you what, I don't know if they were trained to do that. I don't know if the police chief there is going to discipline them, but somebody needs to be held accountable for the actions of these officers. Now, let me add this. I don't paint a picture of cops at all of being bad guys. Like I said, my entire family's law enforcement. I served 38 years in law enforcement. Cops are the good guys. They're not the bad guys. And we must keep that in mind. But when incidents like this happen, corrupt politicians are putting the police in a bad situation. They're pitting the police against the people and the people against the police. And they had taken 30 years, they meaning these draconian socialist communist leaders, have taken years and years and years of building police community relations, and they have destroyed it. Now we have a situation where the police don't trust the community and vice versa. So how can one fight back? How can the patrolman on the street fight back? Here's how you can do it. Number 1, obey your orders. Do not put your job, your pension, or your life on the line. Obey your orders. If you are ordered to arrest people, well, you're going to have to do that. As much as you don't like to do it, it is unconstitutional, but don't take my word for it. Make sure that a court rules that first. But saying that, you obey your orders. When you write the police report, make sure that you name the supervisors, the commanders who ordered you to make the arrest. Make sure their names are in the police report. Because you know how it works. As a patrolman, you're going to make a police report. And then the first line supervisor, usually a sergeant, is going to come and look at it and approve of it. And then a lieutenant is going to approve of it. It's going to write up the chain of command for the chief to look at it. So could you imagine when the sergeant sees his name in that report as the one who ordered you to enforce an unconstitutional law? And then the lieutenant, and on and on and on. You know, there's an old saying, you know, it flows downhill, and unfortunately, it usually flows in the lap of the poor cop out on the street. Now you have an opportunity to make sure that it goes uphill, and then let them hold the bag. Because I'll tell you something, guys and gals in uniform, when the lawsuits come, you know whose name is going to be in that lawsuit as a litigant? You, the guy and the gal who put the handcuffs on those law-abiding citizens. So you make sure that you've got everything covered and put their names in there. And if they tell you that you can't have their name in there, you have to take it out of the report. You can't change a police report, right? You could amend it. So in the amendment, you put down that you have been ordered to change the report. And this is why there's an amendment. You got to protect yourself in this day and age. Tricia, isn't it a tragedy that we're even talking about this? But our cops, I've heard from a lot of patrol officers who are out on the streets, they don't want to be involved in this political charade, but they are, and they need some advice to protect themselves.
Well, exactly. And we support our police officers. And you're right that the real issue and the question is going to be all about courage and integrity of leadership, right? Because police officers and their supervisors all take an oath to uphold the United States Constitution, and they take an oath to uphold their own state constitutions. But the issue is that they uphold the law, and the operative word is law. How is a state's legislature involved in putting together the law? Well, it has to be active and it has to be punctuated with a bill that is passed by the state legislature. If it is not, as in these executive orders that are coming down from, King Gavin Newsom, the unaccountable, he is acting like a dictator, like a monarch, and not like a legislator, an executive officer of a state whose obligation is to sign legislation that comes out of his state legislature. And our great officers and their leadership should always make sure that they are accountable to the law, not to an executive edict that is going to get them in more trouble and pit, like you said, the police against the people. The people have a right to have businesses and to act on their own constitutional rights, and the police have to follow suit.
And so now we know where the people stand with regard to supporting our police officers. We know where our police officers stand with regard to protecting the constitutional rights of the people who are put in a bad situation. So my question is, ladies and gentlemen, where are the police unions? Where are the carpenters union, the hard hats I talked about last night, the American Patriots? I read this morning where, is it Tomi Lahren, Tricia, on Fox Now or wherever she is? She actually put out a statement that she is becoming disillusioned and disappointed in the American people she knew. Where are they? They need to stand up. They need to fight back. I know our viewers are, and there are millions who are, but we need, and I think what she was driving at is what we are driving at. We need people of influence. We need people who are leaders of unions. We need political leaders to stand up shoulder to shoulder, united, and to fight against this draconian, evil socialist communism that is creeping up on our nation. So, I read about 4 sheriffs there in California, what I just mentioned, the poor New York City cops. I mean, the murder rate is soaring there like crazy. Cops are being shot daily. Where are the police unions? And these are the questions that the rank and file need to start asking. You need to put a fire under the rear end of your union leaders to stand up. Now, teachers, you're united when it comes to your pay raises. You're united when it comes to the things that you need in order for you to perform your jobs, although you've been taken over by socialists. Well, I've got news for you. You're not going to be teaching much longer because you're going to be told how to teach, what to teach, and where to teach. And that'll be the end of your careers. As far as our police, they're going to continue to defund police, and the cops we're talking to now, they're not going to be enforcing the laws anymore. They're going to be out of work. Because when they create a national police force like they did in Soviet Russia and in Beijing, China, and other places where communism has flourished, they're going to be in control. That is the dangerous, slippery slope that people slide down, Tricia, when they do nothing.
Well, and that is really where everything is going to meet the road, right? It's going to be a question of, are you rather true to your establishment or to we the people? And that goes for everyone from the Fraternal Order of Police that you mentioned, to the teachers unions, to the, any kind of union like carpenters, metal workers, electricians, and also each and every one of us that has to face that question every day is, when you wake up, are you going to do something today to stand up for your constitutional rights? Or is another day going to go by where we just give them away freely? If we are giving up our constitutional rights and deciding not to stand up for them, well, who's going to fight for them? And when I say fight, I mean in the constitutional way. Our First Amendment says we have a right to protest. A protest doesn't have to mean a collection of people gathering at a specific place to march. It can mean a little effort, a little step every day to make sure that our constitutional rights are preserved and fought for, because if we don't do it, no one else will.
Now, here's something else, folks. The Democrats, the socialists, the communists now trying to take this country. They seem to they seem to believe that minority communities are still going to support them. I think this last election clearly shows that, whether it be President Trump or the Republicans, truly got the support of the minority community. But here's what they're going to do. We got it right here. These are facts. On this broadcast, if you're new, we don't embellish. We do research and we find out if what we are giving to you are facts. Listen to this one. It seems as if that Representative Jamel Bellman, a Democrat in New York, he is arguing that poorer communities should undergo a dramatic reduction in police as an alternative to mass incarceration, a dramatic reduction in police. Now, if you are a citizen of Chicago, if you are a citizen of New York, and you are poor, guess who's getting killed? Kids in the poor neighborhoods. People in poor neighborhoods, the poor communities. I'm telling you, folks, look it up yourself. People are getting shot to death in broad daylight, mugged, beaten, raped. Why? Because there are no police. Now, how can I say that? I can say that based on what I just shared with you. And this just came out this morning, that the number of shootings through November in New York City has risen to levels unseen in years. All right, unseen in years. Now, let me share with you, and I did share with this in a prior broadcast. Last week, my wife and I went back to my old neighborhood. You know where my old neighborhood is, folks, where I was brought up as a kid? In a poor neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York, 65th Street, Bay Ridge. I went to that neighborhood. My God, it looked like Beirut, Lebanon. It sure did. I was shocked, stunned, and I still, I tell you what, folks, I still think about, my Lord, what has happened to Brooklyn? My wife and I are on the expressway back to New Jersey, and I remember as a kid, my mother and father used to take this expressway back to the Brooklyn Bridge and back to New Jersey, and we saw all these factories all lit up at night, and the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and I mean, things were going well. But we're looking around, folks, as we're on that highway. Graffiti, abandoned buildings, burned buildings. But one thing that stuck out in my mind when I was in Bay Ridge on that day, not one cop, not one. Not one New York City police car, not one walking patrolman, nobody in uniform, not one cop. Now, up to a few years ago during the Reagan administration, and I believe during the Trump administration's early years, you'd go into New York City and you'd see cops. But what they did was they eliminated anti-crime units. They eliminated uniform patrols. I used to see cops on horseback all over New York, gone. And I understand it's the same situation in Chicago. Where you need cops are in the poor neighborhoods where people are being shot to death, killed, murdered, raped, where young kids are being gunned down. I mean, are people blind? I mean, we can't see what's going on. And Tricia, when I say people, I'm talking about those who we elected to office. 4 sheriffs, only 4 in California, speaking up against the draconian communist measures that are causing the death of people. Where are those we elected? Where is the California GOP? Where's the New Jersey GOP? Where's the New York GOP? Where in the world are they? We elected them to office. What a tragedy.
Well, it is. And, that's another reason that we're raising our voices so strongly, is because we have to stand in that gap. Someone has to. And that representative that you mentioned, Jamal, what he said in New York, it's ridiculous on its face, because if he intends to protect those vulnerable communities, how in the world would pulling back the police force and defunding them, how would that ever make any sense? What the Democrats in that kind of extreme arm of the Democrat Party want to do is they want to conflate the issues of what we've seen, police brutality that no one agrees with. They want to conflate that with the need for police officers in these neighborhoods. Even Keisha Lance Bottoms, a high-profile Democrat, mayor of Atlanta, said the people who suffer are these minority families and the children. She said in her own words that the babies are being killed. When are we all going to wake up, to your point, as a country, and make sure that we stand in that gap like we're doing a Campaign for America and bring all of these GOP affiliates with us? The time has come to either stand for what's right and stand for truth, or simply get out of the way.
Tricia, I had a viewer ask me a question, and it's a pretty good question. You remember somebody once said the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again with the same results. So here's the question, and maybe you could help answer it. Pretty interesting question. Governor Newsom and Governor Murphy, the two bookends of the communist agenda here in America, they have lockdown, shut down, mandatory masks, mandatory this and mandatory that. They've done everything to destroy the economy of their states. And yet there's a spike in the virus. Something is wrong somewhere. So if you're doing all those things and they're not working, why are you repeating them over and over and over again? So the question is this: are we ever going to hear the number of people who have had testing but have not been positive? We haven't heard that. All we're hearing is positive test. And are they all truly positive? Because I'll tell you, a friend of mine told me this yesterday, went for a test, came out positive, went out for a second test, came out negative. So does that positive test then get eliminated, or does it stay there on the books?
Well, that's such an excellent point, because a number that I have seen floated around is that 45 million, over 45 million Americans have contracted COVID and have recovered from it. So to your exact point, I mean, the proportions are astronomical in terms of who has recovered versus those statistics that we know. The CDC even said only 6% of those death statistics are even correct in terms of only COVID as a cause of death. But your exact point is well taken, especially when we look at Governor Andrew Cuomo's approach. When he went into the severest phase of his lockdown in New York, COVID deaths spiked by 66%. I mean, something is off in the numbers. The science tells us something different than the mask mandates and the business closings are coming out to be. So until we start pushing back and demanding that our rights not be sacrificed for faulty science, that's the day that everything will change, when we do that.
All right, folks, Tricia Flanagan is going to give us an update on the research she is doing on many of these court cases. Don't go nowhere, okay, because what we do is towards the end of our broadcast, we give you an action plan. And boy, last night, did you take action? Did our viewers take action? And I'll share with you exactly what you did and how it worked. So Tricia, can you give us an update? I think, is it tomorrow that's going to be a very, very important day? Because today was important with regard to briefs being filed in reference to the Supreme Court.
Correct. Well, today is what is known as Safe Harbor Day. So this is the day when all the information comes in to certify the electors. Now, that's a day that by the left has been seen as the day that everything closes, and once everything is certified and locked up, that's what's going to happen necessarily on January 20th at Inauguration Day. Well, nothing could be further from the truth, because number one, the only day that's cited in our Constitution is January 20th, the day of inauguration. There is a date of January 6th when Congress convenes and looks at what they have before them in terms of states that have been certified, states that have been allocated to each candidate, and then they make a decision whether or not to go ahead and certify as is, or if they take it upon themselves, as they did in 1877, to make sure that that Congress intervenes if there is if there's one candidate that doesn't have 270 electors, or if there is something that is awry in terms of the way the election was conducted. And now today, December 8th, Safe Harbor Day, we had a couple of big things happening. Number one, we had a ruling by the Supreme Court that did not choose to move Representative Kelly's case forward. Now, again, the left is making a big deal out of that because they're saying that then, that's another case that was lost. Let's keep this in mind. That was not a case brought forth by President Trump. That was a case brought forth by Representative Kelly, who wanted to make sure that the Pennsylvania results were decertified by court edict. That's not what happened. What they decided is that that certification can move forward, that they're not going to hear that case, but there are a lot of other measures that can be taken, and that is just one piece of the puzzle. The other big issue that happened today is that the Supreme Court docketed the case that probably everybody heard about that was brought forth by Texas to file against Michigan, Georgia, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania on the unconstitutionality of those elections. The court agreed to hear the briefings. So I tweeted that out, and that created a lot of stir about that, the Supreme Court hasn't yet agreed to hear the full case, but they have agreed to hear the briefings. Now everything is docketed, and now it moves forward to the next step, to getting a hearing. The briefs will be filed, and now we go on to another avenue that President Trump has. Remember, he has a three-pronged approach. This is just one of those avenues to making sure that all votes have been counted, legal votes, and that we had a free and fair election.
Tricia, I just got a question on Facebook. Folks, it's a good question. Will you take questions? And the answer is yes. So I have one right here. And it's in reference to some of the topics we've talked about tonight. What happens when they pull the health permits on restaurants if they don't go curbside or shut down? Well, this is why we're saying you got to obey the laws. You have to. If they pull your health permit, that's just another headache for you. And this is what socialists and communists do. Look, we have reports, and we're going to be talking about it in the near future, of legislators, state legislators voting to shut down restaurants, outdoor and indoor, and then caught going out to their own little friends' restaurants eating. I mean, these laws are not meant for them to obey. It's meant for us to be enslaved by state control. Look, I've always said, and I know, Tricia, you'll agree with this, obey the law, obey it, and then file your lawsuits later. Because if they're going to pull your health permits, they're going to shut you down forever. You don't want to do that. All right. So let them pull your permit temporarily. You can go to court and then file a lawsuit against them and sue them all. Just sue everybody. I really mean that. Sue them all. And then let them answer as to why they are doing A, B, and C. But Tricia, I think that's being prudent, and I think it's using wisdom.
Well, it is. And, there's an example in Maine. There was a restaurant owner that did push the envelope, and the governor ended up using exactly the means that you just described, pulling permits and putting pressure on this restaurateur who is still fighting this battle after months. And we see across the board that these dictatorial governors who want to wield their power are going to do just that. Now, it's all about what you want to do and how much pressure you want to push back. Lawsuits are expensive and tedious, but it's the right judicial avenue to go down when your constitutional rights have been violated. And I know that there are constitutional lawyers all across the country who have agreed to help individual business owners fight back in the court system. That's the better way to go.
Another viewer says that people need to wake up and understand what's happening before them. And I've got to tell you, Natasha and I, we meet a lot of people. We've talked to a lot of people, and she has pointed out to me again, did you hear what that person said? And here's what they said to a question we had, or actually to a comment we made. Do you know, especially her, she was brought up in Soviet Russia. She says, I was brought up in Soviet Russia, and we didn't believe some of the things that were going to happen to us when the socialists and communists took over. And we are getting responses from people like, never happened here. They'll never take our religion. They'll never take our guns. They're never going to go as far as they did in the Soviet Union. And yet, those are the words we heard from people who lived in Venezuela and in China and in every country now controlled by a socialist communist regime. So the answer to the question is, I don't know what it's going to take for people to wake up, other than we, including the person that asked the question, who is an American patriot, as long as we go out and fight the good fight of faith, and I've always said you pray for God's guidance and wisdom, and at the same time, you just work hard. Remember, in the 1700s, they probably ran into the same problem. There weren't thousands of people marching. There were only a small group of people, a small group of colonists who decided to sound the alarm. Who was it? Paul Revere? He ran through the towns and warning people the British are coming. Well, the communists are coming, and we're sounding the alarm. And this is why we need your help. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I think, Tricia, that's the worry about a lot of people, that people need to wake up. And those who are worrying are those who have awakened. But we need a lot more people to wake up and realize that they're next.
Well, that is one of the most important takeaways that we can have during this election season. I'll tell you how close we are to having our vote, our constitutional rights fully taken away from us. And that is when we look at the January 5th runoff election in Georgia that we already talked about, if we cannot maintain the majority in the Senate, and if we cannot maintain the presidency, which I believe we will, by the way, I think we will win on both of those fronts. But if we look at the possibility, if we lose both the presidency and the United States Senate, we already know what Nancy Pelosi is prepared to put through the House of Representatives. Kamala Harris has already talked about mandatory buybacks of guns. How can you mandate a buyback of something you don't own? Americans have gun ownership rights, but Kamala Harris and Beto O'Rourke, who is probably going to be appointed as the gun confiscations are, that trio that we would see in the White House, the Senate, and the United States House of Representatives would be just what would be needed for that liberal agenda to be put through and pack the court, every right to be taken away. I believe we will be successful. I believe President Trump will win either in the Supreme Court or on January 6th in Congress or both. But that's how close we are. And this is a result of decades of people saying, oh, it'll never happen. I'm not going to act now. I'm not going to stand up now and fight for my rights because it'll never happen. Well, that's how close we are right now. It's that important.
Speaking of Kamala Harris, people are not worried too much about Joe Biden because no one who at least I've spoken with believes he's going to serve the entire 4 years. We wish no ill on anyone, believe me. But they believe because of his health, because of certain issues that many of us have seen during the campaign, that he may not finish his 4 years. He may have to retire, resign for health reasons or whatever. And like I said, we don't wish that on anyone. Absolutely not. But if that happens and she becomes president of the United States, we're done. Folks, believe me, we are done. Only if we don't control the Senate. Because therein lies in her agenda, a true socialist communist agenda that will be unstoppable. When you look at, and I'm encouraging all of you to look at the background of all the people being assigned to his cabinet, I've got to tell you folks, we're beginning to get information about very, very close ties to communist China, very close ties, some of them with Maduro down there in Venezuela, very close ties to enemies of this country. And we need to be cognizant of the fact that these people being appointed in his cabinet, they're not looking out for the best interest of you or me. They're looking out for their own political best interest and the best interest of a socialist communist agenda that will enable them to control our lives. Now here, I said this the other night, I read it the other night, I'll read it to you again. You can't make this stuff up, especially when you're involved now with the so-called candidate named Joe Biden, who believes he's going to be the next president. Maybe he will, maybe it won't. It's not over. But how about this? Jen Psaki, who was named to serve as president-elect. Now, those are not my words, president-elect. So I'm going to say who was named to serve as Joe Biden's White House press secretary, is facing fresh scrutiny over a photo that shows her wearing a Russian hat that bears what, folks? No, it doesn't bear the present Russian Federation flag, but actually bears the communist hammer and sickle. Now, who in the world does things like that unless they're sending a message? I'll tell you what, this person, she's got to either be so dumb, all right, or really so honest and transparent that she's sending us a message, Tricia. Who does that?
Well, exactly. They betray themselves by their fashion choices, but especially by their policies. I mean, they're not even hiding it anymore. Everybody from Bernie Sanders to Kamala Harris, who has been rated by GovTrack as the most progressive senator in that chamber of Congress. Whatever entity you look at, whoever you look at on that continuum, they display their communist credentials in a variety of different ways, whether it be their ties to foreign dictators, like you mentioned, Maduro in Venezuela, or by simply displaying these symbols of communism, the hammer and the sickle. We have to wake up and we have to see what's right before us. And it's all the more reason that we have to stand up and make our voices heard.
Okay, before I share with you how you can be part of our action plan, there's a comment that someone made, and it's worth repeating because it's true. And then I'll qualify it. You can vote your way into socialism, and I'll add communism, but you'll have to shoot your way out. You know, I've got to tell you, there's so much truth to that because there isn't a nation on earth that the elected leaders who have become socialists and communists where they didn't shoot their way out. And I'm sure this gentleman is making such a profound statement, warning people that that's how deep this can get. We don't advocate violence at all. We don't advocate shooting people, but I've cautioned people every night. We're headed towards a cliff that we don't want to go off. And that cliff is violence. That cliff is Americans fighting Americans. Now, what I'm sharing with you is you're not going to hear politicians talk. They're too scared. They're shaking in their pants. Oh, we don't want to go. We don't even want to talk about that. I think we need to have that conversation now because we are close to the cliff. So this statement is so true and so needed to be said. No one wants to be put in a position where we're going to end up shooting our ways out of a situation like they did in the Civil War to save our country. Tricia, I know you got a comment about that, so please add some value to this.
Well, I think that this is the closest our country has ever been to this hostile takeover by the communists. And, you know, we have to clear up, I think, how, there's a misnomer, there's a misunderstanding about socialism being separate from communism. Look, socialism is the nice and tidy little name that the Democrats like to put on the policies of communism. When you look at the underlying issues of both, they are exactly the same. And they rest on a thirst for power and a control that they want to instill from government to us, the people. And unless we, the people, stand up, like you said, and fight back. And what fight means is make sure your voices are heard, because I will tell you that if you get on social media where a lot of these leftist voices are, we have to change the narrative. The mainstream media and all of the big tech giants want us all to think that President Trump is done and that Biden is going to be our next executive commander in chief. And that's not true. And if we, the people, unify our voices and get out there, I know that some people find it distasteful to be on those big tech media channels, but that's exactly what we have to do. We have to push back because the stakes are exactly as dangerous as you just outlined.
Folks, the Campaign for America, we're on the march, and there are a lot of things we're doing that I cannot share with you because we're in the process of truly building a national coalition. We're really doing that. We've got people who are executive leaders in a number of organizations around the country who are now joining us, Campaign for America, to do what must be done to address these policies and socialism and communism now getting a grip on this country. So we're working hard, and we're going to be sharing a lot of this with you when things are finalized as we go into the new year. Now, what can you do? What action can you take? And I've shared with you so many times, I've received letters and messages and emails and calls from even people who are disabled and blind, who are frightened over what's going on in our country, and they want to be part of the solution. Well, we've identified the problem, and we have a solution. And that solution is you, is me. That solution are all of us who are American patriots to do something. So here's what you can do. And you did it last night, and we have the stats to prove it. Number one, this broadcast, no one owns us. We could say a lot of things that politicians on both sides of the aisle are scared to death to even say. Why? They're not concerned about you. They're not concerned about our country. They actually believe with all the money they have and the connections they have and the networks they have that this thing will blow over. This is not blowing over. So we now have a massive grassroots movement in New Jersey in particular, but growing across the country. So here's what you can do. Share this broadcast. You now know we're on 3 platforms and many more to come. Periscope and Twitter, share it, folks. YouTube, share it. Facebook, share it. Just push that button, share. Also, email us. Please email us. We're sending out intelligence reports once a month with critical information that you need to know that the mainstream media, and by the way, that some of these political party leaders are not going to send you because they don't care. It doesn't fit their narrative. I find it amazing how there are politicians in states around the country that are visiting other states, bolstering up their candidates. Many are going to Georgia. Fine, that's a good idea. But I got to tell you, I wonder where they were. Where were they when a lot of their own congressional candidates were running for office in their states? Haven't heard from them. Where are they when they need to speak up on behalf of this president? You know what, folks? That's proof to you. They don't care. I'll tell you. Now, I'm going to take a lot of hits, and I've gotten a lot of nasty comments from people, and I'm not talking about grassroots people, but from some leaders, okay, some people in leadership positions, not many, but maybe about a half a dozen. Well, too bad. You know what? I'm owned by no one. I don't sell my soul. I don't have a government job. I can care less about that stuff. That's why Tricia Flanagan, myself, and others can say what we want to say. We're free. Tricia, do you feel free?
I do. And I think that that's the commitment that's going to be necessary from all of us. I mean, you and I are blessed that we have taken this leap. We have decided that our commitment is to God Almighty, to spreading the message of his word and the Constitution. And we are committed to we the people. That's it. And that's why we can be so bold, because the righteous are as bold as lions, right?
You know, we pray. We're prayer warriors. My wife and I pray every day. I know, Tricia, you do. And we've got prayer cells set up across the country. But, you know, we never had planned to do this. Really, we never had planned to do this broadcast. But, you know, God gives you a call, right? He really does. He calls each and every one of us. He calls those of you who are watching us right now. He's calling you to do something. To do what? Well, first and foremost, Matthew 6:33, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Not 99%, but all these things. What does that mean? You seek God's kingdom. How do you seek his kingdom? How do you seek his righteousness? You work hard to protect what he has given you. He's given you freedom. He's given you liberty. He's given you blessings. And those of you who are facing trials and tribulations right now, I'll tell you, folks, believe me, and one day we'll talk about this at length. He will give you peace. He will give you grace, and he will give you mercy through the storms that you're facing. You need to ask. You need to seek. You need to knock. You need to pray. You really need to do those things. I do it. Believe me. I know Tricia does it. My wife does it. Those of us on our team do it. So, you know, there's an old saying, you know what? You've tried everything else. Try God. I can tell you, you won't lose with God. So please share these broadcasts. Email us. I'll post the email when the videos are posted on our 3 platforms. And if you don't get a chance to read it, or I know some of you are blind and you're listening, how about this? You could play back this video. It's mail, M-A-I-L, at Rogers, R-O-G-E-R-S, for F-O-R, America.us. Mail at rogersforamerica.us. Now, here's the surprise. Unlike other organizations that are involved in politics, unlike them, you're not going to get any solicitation for money from us. We don't want your money. You spend your money on your holiday season. You spend your money on Hanukkah, Christmas. You spend your money on your children and your home. You take care of your money. We're dependent on God to help us, and he has. Believe me, he has. He sent particular people to help us out, and he's going to help us, and I'm counting on him. So you know what, Tricia, the glory and the excitement about that is being able to say, you know, we sought God's kingdom first, and we prayed for his guidance, and we prayed for him to send the people to help us out. You know what the great story of it is? To God be the glory.
Amen. And that gives us the peace that passes all understanding. We're committed to that cause, and we look to God for guidance. How can we go wrong? And we're so blessed that you are sharing this journey with us, you, the viewers. Please spread the word. We can't wait for the next steps.
Okay. Spread the word, share these, retweet them, redo whatever you got to do to get them out on all your social media platforms. And folks, I want to thank you so much for being part of saving our country, the United States of America. God bless you. God bless America. And as I always say, the chief end of man is to love and to glorify God forever. Thank you. God bless. Almost slipped up. Thank you. God bless you.